the 22 News Broadcast Center, this is a Decision 2016 special program. Today, a Democratic debate for the Massachusetts House seat in the 11th Hampden District. And now, here's Rich Tedemern.
Democrats who are running for the seat are here today. Let's take a look at them from left to right. It's Ken Barnett, is the former commissioner of the Springfield Civic Center and Symphony Hall. Swan's son Ben Jr. is the Springfield Planning Board chairman. Larry Lawson is taking up this seat, and also here is Springfield City Councilor Bud Williams. First, each candidate will have 1 minute for an opening statement. Ken Barnett, you go first.
Hello, and thank you, News 22, for having us here. Ken Barnett, I am looking forward to being your next state representative of the 11th Hampden District. I think it important that we have change, bringing new energy, revitalize our community. My stand is on more. I believe the constituents and the voters deserve more, and I will elaborate on that more with movement in our district, seeing a visible representative. Then also opportunity, bringing opportunities to the 11th Hampden District. I also believe that we need more resources, and I believe I can bring the resources from Boston here to the city of Springfield. And finally, we need to have education, not just in the classroom, but we need to educate even our seniors, need education on furthering themselves and bettering themselves, you know, in their golden ages. So that's what I stand for, that's what I believe in the 11th Hampden District, and I want your vote on September 8th.
Thanks, Ken. Bud Williams, your opening statement, please.
First of all, thank these gentlemen for putting a hat in the ring to run for this very important seat. Thanks 22 for putting this debate on so our citizens get a chance to look at us individually. This is a very important election. It's a very serious election. This is a very vast district, from East Forest Park to East Springfield to Pine Point, Mason Square, parts of 16 acres, parts of Maple Heights, Six Corners. It's a very vast district. You need the experience and the know-how to work this district. I bring that experience as your former city councilman. I bring that experience working in the communities. I will bring people together. I understand this district. We don't need on-the-job training. When elected, January 1st, I can hit the ground smoking. I can hit the ground putting together legislation for this district. For example, a new Homer Street school we need so badly. Expanding the services in Blunt Park.
That's time, Mr. Williams. Larry Lawson, your opening statement, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Larry Lawson, and I'm running for state representative because when I look at our community and look at the past and where we've been in the past, I see that we are worse off than we were 10 years ago, than we were 5 years ago, and we've seen our community seem to be going in the wrong way, to a negative situation. What we need to do is we need to bring more quality services to people in our community, and that would include better roads conditions. People deserve that. Better repair our roads, better snow removal. We also need to fight the crime in our city. One of the things, if we're going to build a world-class city, we must begin by making it safe, making Springfield the place that people want to move in. We have a lot of people in the suburbs who would like to move back to the city now that their kids are growing and out of school, and we have to have the type of community that will welcome them as taxpayers. Thank you very much.
And Ben Swan Jr., your opening statement, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Ben Swan Jr. I am a resident of the McKnight neighborhood here in Springfield and have a wife of 23 years, Luz Astacio, and my 4 children are 3 daughters, Alice, Cora, and Lucette, and my foster son of 2 years. I'm running because I feel that I want to have a positive impact on their future. One of the things that I say is that we all of us should exercise responsible ownership of our community. I do that, and I intend to do that in the State House. I was born to two activist parents who instilled in me a sense of justice and appreciation for community service. I've worked 30 years, over 30 years in the private sector, and I've contributed my volunteer time a couple of decades in the community. Please, you'll hear more.
Okay, gentlemen, it's time for the questions. I'll ask the questions. Each of you gets 60 seconds to have your answer. We'll go left to right, that's on your screen there. So we'll start off with Ken answering the question first, and then we'll move along. Everyone answers the same question. And our first question today is, what's the most critical need facing your district, and how would you address it? Ken?
The most critical need right now is public safety for certain. And with that, how would I address it? I think it's important that we continue to work with the City of Springfield, its police department. I myself have been very close to the C3 policing, Sector F in particular. I was one of the first co-chairs of Sector F community policing, and I found it that as long as we're working together with the police department, where they're visible and available, that we do better. Right now, major crimes in our district is down by 26%. That's great, and we need to do more of the same. I'd even like to see maybe venture to have the C3 program, which is down in the north end, who is reporting 68% reduction in major crimes, possibly come up into the district, 11th Hampden District.
Ben Swan Jr., your answer, please.
I believe that economic development is our largest problem. We have seen many homes in the city and many boarded up buildings go into disrepair. We need to rebuild in the way of small businesses and, of course, in the way of buttressing our families in terms of maintaining their own properties. But as important, my biggest concern actually is early childhood education. I think that children, to the extent possible, ought to be reading before their first grade. Today we are concerned after the third or fourth grade when in fact it's a little late. Children deserve our providing them with the skill set that they need to be successful in this global economy. They need to compete with children from India and children from China, and we need to make it possible for them to do so.
Larry Lawson, your answer, please.
Well, I think not only safety and economics, and with I'll start first, if I get a few minutes, about safety. Safety is the key because what it affects the elderly who live in our city, who's doing the right things, who's helping pay taxes. They're in danger as long as we have the violence, which is going on in our community. We need to end that. We can do that in various ways. I can get into that later. In addition to those people, I think that we need to work on economic development would be one of the things that we need to work on, and to have the people who live in the community to begin to own their own businesses, to be able to become a part of the economic system of the city and the state and the country as a whole by doing that. I think we should have, especially for the area that we are running in, we should have our own economic development and training facilities.
Okay, Mr. Williams, your first answer, please.
My first answer is jobs, jobs, jobs. I've walked this great district. I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of citizens. I've knocked on hundreds and hundreds of doors. The underlining message is jobs. I'm the only candidate that supports residency in the city of Springfield. City jobs for city people. Far too many times, individuals live outside the city of Springfield. They come into the city and they take good, decent paying jobs. And oh, by the way, the Commonwealth needs to create a job program to put people to work. We have a lot of construction going on. We have a lot of activity. I don't see the people in the urban communities taking advantage of the job opportunities. We have apprentice programs we need to create. So our young folks who are out of school need vocation training. I would make jobs my centerpiece for city people.
Okay, gentlemen, time for our second question. And first, Ben will answer this one first. And it is, if elected, what's the first piece of legislation you'd like to file and why? Ben?
As a first piece of legislation, I would be looking to, well, so I suppose it sounds a little silly, but an anti-litter campaign is one of my pet peeves. And to the extent that I am not a seasoned legislator, that's something that I can readily introduce, and I actually have some ideas on it. But relative to the needs of the community, I will seek, as a legislator, to look to bring that which we need back to the community. I'm going to be listening to my constituents, getting ideas from small and large businesses alike in terms of what they want me to bring to Boston and bring back from Boston. As well, I will be opening up my office. My intent is to have constituent services available in the district, available to my constituents daily. And that is something that the state does not fund, but that the...
That's time, Mr. Swan.
Thank you.
Mr. Lawson, your answer to question 2, please.
Well, one of the first pieces I work on is because you have to have in order to achieve something, it's not going to happen tomorrow. We start with what we can do tomorrow, next week, the next day. We have to have a short-term plan, a long-term plan to put things in place. One of those that would affect violence and also in terms of educating people would be to have the parents of students to have to, especially parents who are getting some type of assistance from the state, to have to attend open housing and sit down and talk with the teachers and keep up what their children are doing in school. I think that's one of the biggest problems. We have a great education system in the city of Springfield, but what happened along the way is that Springfield school system has to take in all students, regardless of behavior and preparation. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Mr. Williams, your answer, please.
My hopefully first piece of legislation or first action would help create guaranteed treatment on demand for individuals who are saddled with the opiate crisis or heroin or crack cocaine should be able to get treatment on demand and shouldn't have to go to Ludlow to get treatment on demand. So that would be my first act. File legislation, work very closely. We can have beds down here in Springfield and in greater Western Massachusetts. It's sad when you have to go all the way to Worcester or up to Greenfield for someone who wants to get off drugs. As a probation officer, I really understand and know that when individuals want to come off drugs, that bed needs to be ready immediately. That bed isn't ready immediately, that person continues to drift, continues to use. Treatment on demand will be a centerpiece of my legislation.
Mr. Barnett, your answer, please.
Sure, thank you. Well, first of all, it's important that we know, and I want the voters to know, I understand the position of a state representative, and that should be to listen to the constituency, listen to the voters, see what their concerns are, and then bring resources from Boston, from Beacon Hill, to address those issues. And thirdly, if I'm not able to do that financially with the resources coming back, then we must develop laws that will answer the concerns of the people. Now, for my first piece of legislation, outside of listening to the voters, my first piece of legislation would probably go to, it's one of many, but would go to the large footholds that some of these abandoned buildings have in the 11th Hampden District. Too many abandoned buildings, too many abandoned homes, and the larger buildings like the Firestone building, unfortunately the MCDI building that just burned down. We need to do better.
Okay, gentlemen, we're going to take a short 2-minute break right now and then more questions for the candidates running for the Massachusetts House seat in the 11th Hampden District. You're watching 22 News. Welcome back to the debate between the candidates running for the Massachusetts House seat in the 11th Hampden District. Take a look at the candidates once again. I can tell you who they are. From left to right, it's Ken Barnett, Ben Swan Jr., Larry Lawson, and Bud Williams. They're answering questions as we move along here. We're up to question number 3, and Larry, you get to answer this one first. Police in Springfield are dealing with ongoing gun violence. Does the state need additional gun laws, and do you support the Attorney General's recent crackdown on what she describes as copycat guns? Larry?
Well, I don't think, I came from a different era, and most households always had weapons in them. When I grew up, almost everybody's household had a weapon. I'm not necessarily looking for gun control in that sense. I'm looking at it for more or less in terms of education. I think young people should be educated as to safety and what not to do with weapons or whatever. They shouldn't be in the hands of young people. And when we talk about crime so much, in most cases, it is not the handguns that are legal that end up with the crime. Handguns, for those people who are in different types of criminals activity, they're always going to have a weapon. The law is only going to affect those who already obeying the law, but they are not really the people who are out who doing these heinous crimes that we're talking about are using weapons. So for that, I don't think we should take guns away from citizens who are not using for any offense.
Okay, Bud Williams, your answer, please.
Yes, I've worked very hard with Commissioner Barberries to make sure the police department has the resources, has enough manpower to fight the good fight on the street. We have far too many guns on the street of Springfield. I would hope that, along with city and state officials, we figure out, create a task force to find out how these guns are coming into these communities. These young people are not making the guns, but they end up with the guns. And certainly the Attorney General has made a decision. I think that's in the court. I will wait until the court makes a determination to how they view her recent legislation. That's in the court, and I'll hold my peace until the court makes a determination.
Ken Barnett, your answer, please.
First of all, I'd like to just thank the Springfield Police Department for the job that they are doing. It's a tough task, and I appreciate it, and I know my constituents do as well. Relative to the gun law and the change, it's spot on, because people are purchasing guns that are single-shot guns, and then they're manipulating them so that they shoot off rapidly. That wasn't the initial intent, and the behind the scenes, what people are doing with these guns, making them rapid fire, goes against, again, what the gun was actually made for in the case where they're creating crimes with these guns. So I stand behind Warren in her position with stopping and making illegal rather the copycat guns. That's a problem, and we should address it.
Ben Swan Jr., your answer, please.
I've spent 20 years of my life working at Smith & Wesson and inside of the gun industry, so to speak, in the sense that I worked in research and development and understand intimately how guns perform, etc. I recognize that also that Massachusetts has fairly stringent gun laws, probably as much as, if not more than, any other state. What we have today is adequate. We don't need new gun laws, but I too am willing to allow the legal process to play out if it's determined that the ruling is appropriate, then we can address that at that time.
Okay, gentlemen, we're up to question number 4, and Bud, you get to answer this question first. Massachusetts voters will have a November ballot question concerning the lifting of the cap on charter schools in the state. Should there be more charter schools in Western Massachusetts, or do they drain money away from public schools? Ben? Actually, it's Bud who answers first.
Yeah. First of all, I want to, Mr. Barnett, the Attorney General is not Elizabeth Warren. It's Healy is the Attorney General. So the viewing audience will understand it's in Healy's hands. I am not voting for new charter schools, lifting the cap. I support the first charter school in the city of Springfield. I think right now there's not enough accountability. It drains money from Superintendent Ward in the Springfield public school system, which causes a big deficit on our end. And oh, by the way, charter schools are private schools that are run by private people, but there's no public scrutiny. So in other words, the superintendent can't go in and look at their books. I think that's not fair, and I will disagree with Governor Baker on this. I will not be voting to lift the cap on charter schools.
Ken Barnett, your answer, please.
Relative to charter schools, I believe that folks learn at different levels, and we're not all capable necessarily of learning from the box, if you will. And I think charter schools play a major role in giving an alternative to learning, an alternative to the mind growth of our children. So I am in favor of charter schools, but I am not in favor of charter schools taking away from the public school monies. That I'm not in favor of whatsoever. And in fact, I'd be willing to find ways, be it on committee or otherwise, to find monies for the charter schools. But I am in favor of them because I do believe they serve a purpose in educating, making available learning that's more conducive to maybe not your everyday student and an alternative way of learning. So I'm in favor of charter schools. I'm not in favor of them taking away monies from the public schools.
Ben Swan Jr., your answer.
Well, it must be recognized that over 95% of our children are in public schools, and that is where our investments ought to remain. We have a number in Springfield of public schools that are well performing, and I think that we can improve on those models. There also could be greater flexibility in terms of schools being more autonomous, and the administration inside the school developing or implementing different models that improve upon those schools. I don't think that one size fits all, but I do think that we can do better with our public schools.
And Larry Lawson, your answer, please.
I'm not in favor of increasing charter schools. As a teacher and as a citizen of Springfield, in my experience system, I realize Springfield has some good schools, and the quality of the schools, the teachers are highly qualified. We have various different types of schools for different interests. One of the things, if we look around at charter school, we need to look at the past and what have happened so far. If we look at Springfield, I know of 5 charter schools here in Springfield that existed, and neither one of them exists today. And what happens, the charters, the people that runs the charter school get to walk away and leave those students. Those students in the middle of the year has to be stuck back into the regular school system, because Springfield school system has to take the kids back, and they move, overcrowd the rooms because they wasn't planning on that, because the other kids who was at the charter schools had already been in those systems, and they have to force them somehow back into the regular school system.
All right, gentlemen, it's time for closing statements. Right now you have 45 seconds each to make your closing statement, and we'll start off with Ken Barnett. Ken?
Thank you. Again, to 22 News, I appreciate, Rich, the great job that you've done here moderating, and to all the candidates on the panel with me. I am grateful to be here, and I just want to underscore that in my candidacy, I believe that my constituents, the 11th Hampden District, deserve more. I am running simply because I want to be here. I wasn't coerced into this. I wasn't, asked and prompted by a relative or others to be in this race. I'm in this race because I want to work. I want to fight for the 11th Hampden District. Some may say it was considered inside baseball what went on between the candidate and his father, who's going to be in the race and who's not. I'm in this race because I want to be here, and not because of a broken promise and then I turned around and said, you know what, you lied to me, I'm getting in the race. No, Kenneth Barnett is here because of you. He wants to serve the 11th Hampden District.
Ben Swan Jr., your closing statement, please.
Yes, it must be said that my purpose for running for this office is mine and mine alone. I do not believe that a name is a qualification. I bring my life experience to this race. I'm a parent. I'm a veteran of the private sector for over 35 years with 2 of the most prestigious companies in Springfield, in the state. I have decades of community service, first with my neighborhood council, nonprofit corporations, and today I'm a chair of the Springfield Planning Board. I am in this for the future of our children. That is the reason I'm asking for your vote, and when I'm your state representative, I will be available to you, and I will provide the service that you deserve.
Bud Williams, you're up next with your closing statement.
First of all, thank you, Rich, and 22, and for the gentlemen who putting their hats in the ring. They need to be commended, and that's really outstanding. I've worked very hard for this seat. I've knocked on your doors. I've canvassed the neighborhood. I've heard you loud and clear. You want representation. I will represent the entire district, from East Springfield to East Sports Park to Mason Square to Six Corners to Pine Point to 16 acres. When I'm sworn in January 1st, it won't be any learning necessary in terms of how to deal with people. I've worked with the mayor. I've worked with the legislators already. I've worked with the school committee. I bring people together. I've sponsored legislation. I know how to balance a budget. I know about local aid. I know about reimbursement. I'm the most qualified candidate for this job at this particular time. I'm asking you for your vote. I won't let you down. I'll be the representative that will represent this entire 11th Hampden District.
Larry Lawson, your closing statement, please.
I believe that any one of the candidates can go to Boston and vote up or down on the issue or whatever. One of the things that is missing in this process, I think, is leadership. I'm running because a lot of things that I've fought for in this community, being a regular citizen, working 60 hours a week at my own job, ward representation. When we didn't have ward representation, I'm the person who organized the ward representation movement and coordinated. They said we couldn't do it. It was a success. I had to fight with the elected officials, mayors, councilors, and all this we did as a group that I organized to fight to do this. We're successful at that. When we had the murders of the women in our community, we said, no, it's the same killer. It's 2.5 years and nobody doing anything about it. We went down. I found some people to go down with me. We protested at the police department. 2.5 weeks, sit down with the mayor and everyone. 2.5 weeks later, they had a person. We haven't had a murder since. I have been fighting in this community for many things because it has to be done. We have to be able to coordinate things and fight also in addition to make changes in addition to being just a legislator. I want to be more. I want to be your leader. Give me the power to do that by electing me on September the 8th.
That's time, Mr. Lawson. Thank you, gentlemen. That concludes our look at the Massachusetts House 11th Hampden District and the Democratic candidates who are running. Thanks to Ken Barnett, Ben Swan Jr., Larry Lawson, and Bud Williams. Primary day, don't forget, is Thursday, September 8th. If you missed any of today's debate, you can always see it again on our website at wwlp.com. I'm Rich Tadimer. Thanks for joining us, and have a good afternoon.